I stared at the empty champagne glasses, arranged in perfect rows across the pristine white tablecloth. Each one caught the sunset's glow from the rooftop venue, creating tiny prisms of light that should have been magical. Instead, they mocked me with their emptiness. My name is Haley, and I'd spent 3 weeks planning what was supposed to be the perfect proposal dinner. Not my proposal. I was the planner, not the bride-to-be. My boyfriend Evan had hired my own company to orchestrate his grand gesture, not knowing I'd taken over the project personally. "Miss Morgan?" The catering manager approached, wringing his hands. "The guests are getting restless. Should we begin serving?" I checked my phone again. No messages, no calls. Just the time. 7:45 p.m. Evan was now 45 minutes late to his own proposal dinner. "Give it 5 more minutes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. 20 of our closest friends and family members were waiting, including my sister Lily, who kept shooting me concerned glances from across the room. Sophie, my best friend and designated photographer for the evening, lowered her camera. "Haley, maybe you should try calling him again?" "Already did. 3 times. I smoothed down my navy cocktail dress, a nervous habit I'd developed over years of managing crisis moments at events. But this was different. This was personal. My phone buzzed. Finally. But instead of Evan's face, I saw a text message. "Can't make it. Something came up. Sorry." The words blurred as I read them again. And again. 7 words. 7 stupid words to demolish weeks of planning and years of trust. "He's not coming," I announced, my voice carrying across the expectant silence. The string quartet I'd hired stopped mid-song, their bows hovering uncertainly over their instruments. Lily rushed over, her green eyes wide with what looked like panic rather than surprise. "What do you mean he's not coming? Did he say why?" I handed her my phone, watching her face carefully. Something flickered in her expression. Was it guilt? Relief? Before she composed herself. "This isn't like him," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Isn't it?" Sophie cut in, her tone sharp. She'd never fully warmed to Evan, despite my attempts to bring them closer. Now I wondered if she'd seen something I'd missed. The next hour passed in a blur of apologies and awkward goodbyes. I maintained my professional smile, thanking guests for coming, assuring them everything was fine. It wasn't until the last guest left that I allowed myself to sink into one of the ghost white chairs. "I'll handle the vendors," Sophie offered, squeezing my shoulder. "You should go home." "I'll take her," Lily said quickly. Too quickly. "No." I stood up, gathering my composure like armor. "I need to stay. This is still my event, even if it's turned into a disaster." "Haley," Lily started, but I cut her off. "I'm fine. Really, just give me a minute alone." They retreated reluctantly, leaving me with the sunset view of the city I'd chosen so carefully for this moment. The perfect backdrop for a perfect proposal. What a joke. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Evan. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. Lunch?" I typed back a single word. "Where?" His response came immediately. "Our usual place, 1 p.m. Our usual place. The cafe where we'd had our first date 2 years ago. Where he'd first told me he loved me. Where apparently he was planning to end things. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? You don't skip your own proposal dinner unless you've changed your mind about the whole thing. As I began directing the cleanup, I caught sight of Lily in an intense conversation with someone on her phone, her face hidden in the shadows. When she noticed me watching, she quickly ended the call and plastered on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That's when I knew. Something wasn't just wrong, it was worse than I imagined. And tomorrow at lunch, I'd find out exactly how much of my life had been built on lies. The cafe's familiar warmth felt foreign now, like a childhood home occupied by strangers. I arrived 15 minutes early, watching Evan's usual parking spot through the window. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I gripped my coffee cup tighter, letting the heat burn away the tremors. Sophie's words from this morning echoed in my head. "Let me come with you. I don't trust him." But this conversation needed to happen alone. I'd spent the night piecing together a timeline of strange occurrences. Evan's sudden business trips, Lily's evasive behavior, the way they both seemed to disappear at the same social events. Evan walked in at exactly 1 p.m., impeccable as always in his tailored suit. The same suit he should have worn to propose in. Haley. He slid into the seat across from me, his expression carefully neutral. About last night. Save it, I cut him off. Just tell me why. He leaned back, studying me with those calculating eyes I used to find so captivating. Things have been complicated lately. I needed time to think. Complicated? I let out a sharp laugh. You had me plan my own humiliation. That's not complicated, Evan. That's cruel. A flash of genuine remorse crossed his face, or maybe I just wanted to see it there. I never meant for you to be involved in the planning. That was unfortunate. Unfortunate, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Like how unfortunate it is that my sister keeps showing up at your office after hours? His composure cracked for just a second, a slight widening of the eyes, a quick clench of his jaw. Lily's been helping with some graphic design work. You knew that. Did I? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the photos Sophie had sent me this morning. Because these don't look like business meetings. The images showed Evan and Lily entering his office building at 9 p.m. last Thursday, then leaving separately around midnight. Nothing definitively damning, but enough to make my stomach turn. You're having me followed now? His voice hardened. No, but apparently I should have been. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You know what's really unfortunate, Evan? That I had to hear about your lunch with Elena from the catering staff at LeBlanc. This time, his mask slipped completely. How did you... I own an event planning company. People talk to me. I gathered my purse, fighting to keep my voice steady, especially when they see my fiancé having an intimate lunch with his ex-girlfriend the day before he's supposed to propose. It's not what you think. Save the explanation for Lily. I'm sure she'll be very interested to hear about Elena. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist. Haley, wait. There are things you don't understand. I yanked my arm free. You're right. I don't understand how my sister could do this. I don't understand how you could make me look like a fool in front of everyone we know. But mostly, I don't understand why you're still lying when we both know it's over. I walked out, my heels clicking against the tile floor like a metronome counting down the seconds of our relationship. Outside, I spotted Lily waiting in her car across the street. She didn't see me, too focused on her phone, probably waiting for Evan's signal. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Found something. Come to my studio, now. I took one last look at the cafe window. Evan was already on his phone, probably warning Lily I knew something. Let them scramble. Let them try to cover their tracks. They didn't know about Elena's voicemail yet, the one Sophie had somehow obtained. They didn't know about the financial records showing regular payments from Evan's company to Marcus's consulting firm. They didn't know that their careful house of cards was about to collapse. I got into my car, hands steady now. The time for tears and confusion was over. Now it was time to plan something much bigger than a proposal dinner. Something that would make last night's humiliation look like a casual disappointment in comparison. My phone buzzed again, Lily calling. I declined it, watching her face fall in her car's rearview mirror. Poor Lily, always so transparent with her emotions. She had no idea what was coming. I started my engine, heading towards Sophie's studio. Whatever she'd found, it would be another piece in the puzzle of betrayal I was slowly assembling. And when I finally had the full picture, no one would see the revenge coming until it was too late. Sophie's studio felt like a crime scene when I walked in. Documents and photos covered every surface, connected by red string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. She stood in the center, her camera forgotten around her neck. I found Elena, she said without preamble. My stomach dropped. And she's dead, Haley. The words hit like a physical blow. I grabbed the nearest chair, steadying myself. What do you mean, dead? Car accident, 6 months ago. Sophie handed me a newspaper clipping. Except it wasn't an accident. Look at the date. I scanned the article. 2 days after Elena had threatened to expose Evan's business practices to the SEC. The timing wasn't subtle. There's more. Sophie pulled up financial records on her laptop. Evan's company has been hemorrhaging money for months, but look where it's going. The screen showed regular transfers to an offshore account, each one coinciding with a payment from Marcus's consulting firm, the same firm where my sister Lily had started freelancing 3 months ago. My phone buzzed. Another message from Lily. Please talk to me. It's not what you think. Oh, it's exactly what I think, I muttered, silencing the phone. Sophie hesitated. There's something else you need to see. She played a voicemail recording. Elena's voice, shaky but determined, filled the studio. Evan, I know what you and Marcus are planning. Using Lily to get to Haley's client list? That's low, even for you. But the SEC fraud? That's what's going to bury you. I'm meeting them tomorrow unless... The message cut off. The next day, Elena's car went off a bridge. How did you get this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Elena sent copies to multiple people. Insurance. Sophie's eyes met mine. I'm not the only one who has it. A knock at the studio door made us both jump. Through the frosted glass, I recognized Lily's silhouette. Don't, Sophie warned, but I was already moving. I opened the door. Lily stood there, mascara streaked down her face. Haley, please. How long? I demanded. What? How long have you been helping Evan steal my clients? Her face crumpled. It wasn't like that. Marcus said it was just market research. Market research? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Is that what you call sleeping with my fiancé too? Lily flinched. That only happened once. I was drunk and... Save it. I stepped back into the studio. Did you know about Elena? The color drained from her face. What about Elena? She's dead, Lily. Convenient timing, don't you think? No. She shook her head violently. No, Evan wouldn't. Marcus said she moved to Europe. Marcus says a lot of things, doesn't he? I grabbed Elena's accident report from Sophie's desk. Like how he's just doing consulting work? Not helping Evan launder money through your graphic design contracts? Lily swayed, grabbing the doorframe. I didn't know. I swear, Haley, I didn't know about any of this. Get out. Please, let me explain. Get out! I slammed the door in her face, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. Sophie touched my shoulder. What are you going to do? I stared at the web of evidence before us. The financial records, the accident report, Elena's final warning. All the pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. First, I'm going to call the SEC myself. I pulled out my phone. Then I'm going to destroy everything they've built, their reputations, their business, their perfect little scheme. Haley. Sophie's voice was careful. That could get dangerous. If they really had something to do with Elena's death, then they should have thought of that before they involved my sister. I started gathering the documents. They wanted access to my client list? Fine. Let's see how those clients react when they learn where their money's really going. My phone lit up with a text from Evan. We need to talk. All of us. Tonight. I showed it to Sophie, who shook her head. It's a trap. Of course it is. I texted back, LeBlanc, 8 p.m. The same restaurant where he'd met Elena before her death. Let them think they had the upper hand. Let them think they could still control this situation. I had evidence of their fraud, proof of their betrayal, and nothing left to lose. By the time this was over, they'd learn what it really meant to trust the wrong person. LeBlanc's elegant interior felt like a stage set now, with every server and guest a potential witness to whatever was about to unfold. I arrived early, choosing a corner table that gave me a clear view of both entrances. The flash drive in my clutch felt heavier than it should, weighted with evidence that could destroy lives. Marcus arrived first, sliding into the seat across from me without invitation. You need to stop digging, he said, his usual charm replaced by something harder. Interesting opening line. I sipped my water, studying him over the rim. No, hello, future sister-in-law? Elena should have stopped digging too. The threat hung in the air between us. I set my glass down carefully, noting how his left hand kept twitching toward his jacket pocket. You know what's fascinating, Marcus? I kept my voice light. How someone so careful could leave such a messy paper trail. His jaw tightened. Whatever you think you found, table for two? Lily's voice cut through our tension. She stood there in her favorite blue dress, the one I'd bought her for her last birthday, with Evan close behind her. Isn't this cozy? Evan said, pulling out Lily's chair. The gesture was familiar, practiced. How long had they been rehearsing these little moments? Almost like family, I agreed. Speaking of which, how's your mother, Marcus? Still managing that bridge club in Miami? Color drained from his face. The woman who died in Elena's car hadn't been Elena at all. But proving that would take more than the circumstantial evidence I had. For now, the fact that he recognized the threat was enough. "We should order," Evan suggested smoothly, but his knuckles were white around his menu. "Actually, I already ordered for everyone." I smiled. "Hope you don't mind. I know all your favorites, after all." Lily shifted uncomfortably. "Haley, please. Can we just talk about this like adults? Like the adults who orchestrated a 2-year con to access my client list?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages. "Or the adults who've been systematically draining those clients' accounts through fake investment schemes?" "It's more complicated than that," Evan started. "It always is." I looked directly at Lily. "Remember when Mom died? How complicated things were then? How you swore we'd always protect each other?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant to sleep with my fiancé, to help him steal from people who trusted me, to get involved with—" I caught myself, noting Marcus's subtle head shake at Evan. Interesting. They hadn't told Lily everything. The waiter arrived with our food, 4 plates of Elena's favorite dish. Marcus's hand jerked so violently he knocked over his water glass. "Is something wrong?" I asked innocently. "I thought everyone liked seafood linguine. It was Elena's go-to order here, wasn't it, Evan?" "Enough games," Evan snapped. "What do you want?" "Want? I want my sister back. I want the last 2 years of my life back." I leaned forward. "But since that's impossible, I'll settle for watching you lose everything instead." "You don't want to do this," Marcus warned. "Actually, I do. But first," I turned to Lily. "Did they tell you about the insurance policy? The one that paid out after the accident?" Lily frowned. "What insurance policy?" "The one in your name." I pulled out a document, sliding it across the table. "Signed 3 days before Elena's car went off that bridge, with you as the beneficiary." The color drained from her face as she read. "I never signed this." "No," I agreed softly. "You didn't." The pieces were falling into place behind her eyes. The forged signature, the convenient timing, the way Marcus had insisted she start working with them right after Elena's death. Evan reached for the paper, but Lily snatched it back. "What did you do?" she whispered, looking between him and Marcus. "Lily, baby, let me explain," Marcus started. "Don't call me that." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Don't ever call me that again." As she rushed out, Evan and Marcus exchanged a look that confirmed everything I'd suspected. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd used my sister as an unwitting accomplice in something much darker. I stood up, dropping several bills on the table. "Dinner's on me, gentlemen. Consider it a parting gift." "This isn't over," Evan called after me. I turned back, meeting his gaze. "No, it's not. But now Lily knows what you really are. And that's just the beginning." The SEC documents felt heavy in my hands as I watched Evan's company through the glass walls of their downtown office. From my car, I could see him pacing in his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. One email from me and those documents would reach every major news outlet in the city. My phone lit up with Sophie's message. "Lily's here. She's a mess. Says Marcus threatened her." Of course he did. I started the engine, but another text stopped me. "Someone broke into my studio last night. All the Elena evidence is gone." My hands trembled as I dialed Sophie's number. She answered on the first ring. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine, but Haley, they left something. A photo of your parents' car accident." The world tilted sideways. That accident had never been explained. A brake failure on a clear day. Both parents dead instantly. I'd been 22. Lily 20. "Get out of there," I said. "Take Lily and go to—" "The lake house," she finished. "Already on our way." I ended the call, my mind racing. The lake house was our emergency spot off the grid, where we'd hidden after our parents died. Only family knew about it. My office was closer than Evan's building. I needed those backup files before— A tap on my window made me jump. Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets, smiling like we were meeting for coffee. I rolled down the window an inch. "Following me now? Just making sure you don't do anything rash." He glanced at the SEC documents on my passenger seat, like sending those to the wrong people. "You mean the right people? You know what's interesting about brake lines?" He leaned closer. "How easily they can fail. Twice even." The threat hung between us, crystal clear. "Get in," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Get in the car, Marcus. You want to talk? Let's talk." He hesitated, then walked around to the passenger side. As soon as he closed the door, I hit the accelerator. "What are you doing?" He grabbed the dashboard as I swerved through traffic. "Taking us somewhere private." I turned onto the highway, pushing the speed limit. "You want to discuss brake failures? Let's do it properly." His composure cracked. "Slow down." "Why? Scared of accidents?" I changed lanes aggressively. "Tell me about my parents." "I don't know what you're—" 8 years ago, Marcus. Before you met Lily, before Evan started his company. You worked at the garage that serviced their car. He went very still. "How did you—" Elena didn't just keep records about Evan. She had files on everyone. I took a sharp exit. "Including the mechanic who helped stage their accident. Pull over." "No." I pressed harder on the gas. "First, you're going to call Evan. Put him on speaker." "You're insane." "Maybe, but I'm also the one driving." I swerved again, making him grab the door. "Make the call." His hands shaking, he dialed. Evan answered immediately. "Where are you?" Evan demanded. "With your ex-fiancée," Marcus said, who's apparently lost her mind. "Having fun yet?" I asked loudly. "Because I am. Nothing like a nice drive to clear the head. Maybe we'll check the brakes when we stop, if we stop." "Haley," Evan's voice turned serious. "Whatever you think you know. I know everything." I took another turn too fast. "About Elena, about my parents, about how you used my sister to cover your tracks. The only question is, what am I going to do about it?" Silence filled the car. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to transfer back every penny you stole. You're going to confess to Elena's murder. And you're going to leave my sister alone." "Or what?" Evan asked. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my ears. "Or I drive this car off the same bridge where Elena died, with your partner in crime beside me. Your choice." Marcus's face went ash white as we approached the bridge. "You wouldn't," Evan said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Wouldn't I? You killed my parents, used my sister, stole my life." I pressed the accelerator harder. "Maybe it's time someone showed you what real revenge looks like." The bridge loomed ahead, its guardrails gleaming in the afternoon sun, just like they had the day Elena died. "Tick-tock, boys," I said softly. "What's it going to be?" The charity gala sparkled with false promises, just like everything else in my life had. I stood at the podium, watching Evan and Lily enter arm in arm, their practiced smiles never reaching their eyes. 300 of the city's elite turned to watch them, unaware they were about to witness something far more entertaining than another engagement announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady despite the weight of the USB drive in my hand. "Tonight we're here to talk about trust." Evan's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine across the ballroom. He knew. Of course he knew. But he couldn't stop what was already in motion. "Trust in our financial institutions," I continued, clicking to the first slide. "Trust in our loved ones." Another click. Elena's accident report appeared on the screen. "And trust in justice." Gasps rippled through the crowd as bank statements replaced the accident report, showing millions in fraudulent transfers. Evan started moving toward the stage, but security, hired by me, not him, blocked his path. My former fiancé, Evan Carter, and his associate Marcus Reed have been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme through their investment firm. My voice carried over the growing murmurs. But that's not their worst crime. Lily stood frozen, her champagne glass slipping from her fingers. The crash echoed through the suddenly silent room. 8 years ago, they orchestrated a car accident that killed 2 people. My parents' photos appeared on screen. And 6 months ago, they murdered Elena Martinez to cover their tracks. Chaos erupted. Phones came out, recording everything. Evan's face contorted with rage as he shoved past security. "You have no proof," he snarled, reaching for the podium. I held up the USB drive. "I have every proof, already sent to the SEC, FBI, and every major news outlet in the country." "You're destroying everything," he hissed. "Like you destroyed my family?" The sound of breaking glass cut through the commotion. Marcus had Lily by the arm, dragging her toward the exit. "Tell them," he ordered. "Tell them it's all lies." But Lily pulled away, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. Not anymore. Then you'll go down with us." Marcus reached into his jacket. The gunshot was deafening. Screams erupted as people rushed for the exits. I saw Lily fall, red blooming across her blue dress. My feet moved before my brain could process what was happening. No. I pressed my hands against the wound in her shoulder, her blood warm and sticky between my fingers. Stay with me, Lily. Please. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know about Mom and Dad. Evan's laughter cut through the chaos. He stood over us, holding another gun. Always trying to save each other. How touching. You're surrounded, I said. It's over. Maybe. He aimed the gun at my head. But you won't be around to see how it ends. A second shot rang out. I flinched, but it was Evan who stumbled backward, clutching his arm. Sophie stood in the doorway, her camera forgotten, holding the security guard's weapon. Actually, she said, I think we all will. As police sirens wailed in the distance, I held my sister close, watching my carefully orchestrated revenge crumble into something messier and more violent than I'd planned. Lily's blood seeped into my dress, a stark reminder that vengeance always demands its own price. The evidence, Evan groaned from the floor. It'll never hold up. You've got nothing but circumstantial. She has me. Elena stepped through the crowd, very much alive, though her face bore scars from the accident that had killed her sister instead. And I have everything. My victory should have felt sweeter. Instead, watching Lily pale from blood loss, seeing the wreckage of lives scattered across the ballroom floor, I realized revenge wasn't the clean, satisfying thing I'd imagined. It was messy, costly, and left scars that might never heal. As paramedics rushed in and police officers began securing the scene, I caught my reflection in a shattered champagne glass. I barely recognized the person staring back, someone who'd become as calculating and ruthless as the people she'd sought to destroy. The question wasn't whether I'd won. The question was what I'd lost along the way. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me as I followed the detective's brisk pace. Through the window of Lily's room, I could see Sophie standing guard, her camera ready as always. We've got them both in custody, Detective Chen said, stopping at the door. But there's something you need to see first. She handed me a phone, Elena's, recovered from a safety deposit box. The video started playing automatically. Elena, alive but terrified, speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. Like my sister was supposed to be dead. Like the Morgans were supposed to be dead. My hand trembled as faces flashed across the screen. Not just my parents, but others. All accidents. All connected to Evan's rise to power. Your sister's awake, Sophie called from the doorway, and she's talking. Inside, Lily lay pale against white sheets, but her eyes were clear. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Marcus escaped custody. Before I could respond, Elena stepped into the room. The scars on her face caught the fluorescent light, a permanent reminder of the accident that killed her sister instead of her. He'll come for the evidence, Elena said. All of it. Let him. I pulled out my phone, sending the video file to every contact I had. It's too late to bury the truth now. The lights flickered, then went out. Emergency generators hummed to life, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Through the window, I saw hospital security running toward the stairs. He's here, Sophie said, checking her camera's memory card. And he's not alone. A gunshot echoed from the stairwell, then another. Get Lily out, I ordered Sophie. Use the service elevator. Elena, go with them. What about you? Lily grabbed my hand. Haley, please. I started this. I'll finish it. The door burst open. Marcus stood there, wild-eyed, gun trained on Elena. Behind him, Evan emerged from the shadows, his arm still bandaged from Sophie's shot. The video, Evan demanded. Delete it, now. Already gone viral. I stepped between them and Lily's bed. Check your phone. Check any phone. Marcus fired at the ceiling, sending plaster raining down. You think this is a game? Your sister dies next. Like you killed Elena's sister? I watched his face contort. Or was that supposed to be Elena? Hard to tell identical twins apart in a burning car, isn't it? Shut up. Marcus swung the gun toward me. Marcus, Evan's voice carried a warning. We need her alive to what? Elena stepped forward. To sign over the company? Like you made me sign over mine before you tried to kill me? Another shot rang out, but not from Marcus's gun. He crumpled, revealing Detective Chen in the doorway, her weapon steady. Evan lunged for Marcus's fallen gun. I kicked it away, sending it skittering under Lily's bed. He grabbed my throat instead, slamming me against the wall. "You could have had everything," he snarled. "We could have built an empire." "Built on what?" I choked out. "Murder? Theft? My sister's guilt? On survival." His grip tightened. "Your parents were weak. Elena was weak. But you understand what it takes. You're just like me." "No." I drove my knee up, breaking his hold. "I'm nothing like you." As he stumbled back, Sophie's camera flashed, capturing his rage, his desperation, his final moment of freedom before Detective Chen's handcuffs clicked shut. "Haley Morgan." He spat my name like poison. "Always planning the perfect event. Was this ending perfect enough for you?" I looked at Lily, alive and safe. At Elena, finally free from hiding. At Sophie, documenting every moment of justice served. Actually, I rubbed my bruised throat. I think it could use one final touch. I pulled out Elena's phone, playing the last video she'd recorded, Evan's full confession, filmed during our confrontation at LeBlanc, transmitted live to the FBI. As they led him away, I sat beside Lily's bed, taking her hand. The revenge I'd planned had nearly destroyed us both. But maybe, in its ashes, we could build something stronger than before. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." "I know." I squeezed her hand. "Me too." Outside, sirens wailed into the night, carrying away the men who'd thought they could bury their secrets forever. They never understood that some truths refuse to stay hidden, no matter how deep you try to bury them. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should in spring. I watched Evan and Marcus being led away in handcuffs, their expensive suits replaced by prison orange. Neither looked back. Men like them never do. Elena stood beside me, her scars catching the morning light. "The money's been traced," she said. "They're returning it to all the victims. Not everything can be returned." I thought of my parents, of Elena's sister, of all the lives broken beyond repair. "No," she agreed, "but some things can be rebuilt." Inside my office, Lily was waiting. She'd insisted on coming back to work, even with her arm still in a sling. The design sketches on her desk were different now, memorials for those lost to Evan's schemes, funded by the recovered money. "The Thompson wedding called," she said, not looking up. "They want to know if we're still handling their event." "Are we?" She finally met my eyes. "That depends. Are we still a team?" The question carried the weight of everything we'd lost and found. I picked up one of her sketches, a garden memorial with 2 intertwined trees reaching toward the sky. "You designed this for Mom and Dad?" She nodded, tears threatening. I thought, maybe it's time to build something beautiful from all this ugliness. Sophie burst in, camera in hand as always. "You need to see this." She pulled up a news article on her tablet. They found more evidence in Evan's private servers, other accidents, other families. "How many?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "Dozens, going back years before he met you." She hesitated. "And there's something else. Remember that bridge club in Miami? Marcus's mother? Wasn't his mother. Another victim who knew too much, replaced by someone who looked similar enough. They had a whole network of people helping them hide bodies and identities." Lily's hand found mine across the desk. This time I didn't pull away. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked at the 3 women before me, my sister, who'd lost her way but found her courage, Sophie, whose loyalty never wavered, and Elena, who'd sacrificed everything to expose the truth. Now we finish what we started. I pulled out a file I'd been working on. There are other families out there who deserve answers, other victims who need justice. "It's dangerous," Sophie warned. "Some of Evan's associates are still out there. So are we." Elena's voice carried steel beneath its softness, and we know how to fight back now. A notification pinged on my phone, Detective Chen requesting a meeting. More evidence had surfaced, more connections to unravel. The web of deceit stretched further than any of us had imagined. "I can't ask you to risk everything again," I told them. Lily stood, her good arm reaching for a fresh sketch pad. "You're not asking, we're choosing." Sophie raised her camera, capturing the moment, not of victory or vengeance, but of 4 women choosing to stand together against the shadows that had tried to break them. Besides, Elena added, touching her scars, some fights choose you. I looked at my reflection in the window, remembering the woman who'd planned her revenge with such cold precision. She was still there, but changed, tempered by loss, strengthened by truth, guided by something deeper than vengeance. One condition, I said, turning back to them. We do this right. No more secrets between us. No more shadows to hide in. Lily's design took shape on her pad, a phoenix rising from ashes, its wings spread wide enough to shelter those beneath. Protection, not revenge. Justice, not vengeance. The Thompson wedding's next week, she said, a hint of her old smile returning. Should we show them how Morgan sisters throw a party? First, I picked up Detective Chen's message. We have some other plans to make. Outside, spring sunlight broke through clouds, casting long shadows across the city. But shadows don't seem so dark once you've learned to navigate them. Sometimes they even show you the way forward if you're brave enough to look. Sophie raised her camera one more time. Ready? We were, all of us. Not for an ending, but for whatever came next. Together.
Your grandmother's farm is worthless, the Westland Development executive declared, tossing soil samples onto my desk like they were evidence in a murder trial. Contaminated land, outdated infrastructure. We're being generous, offering $500,000. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the last 3 years secretly transforming that worthless land into the most valuable property in the county, not for its development potential, but for what grew beneath its surface. My name is Elena Morales, and until recently, most people in Riverdale knew me only as Abuela Rosa's granddaughter who moved back from the city. What they didn't know was that I'd returned with a master's degree in agricultural science and a plan to save not just my grandmother's farm, but our entire agricultural community. I still remember the day I decided to come home. I was sitting in my sterile corporate office at Agritech Industries, reviewing genetic modification proposals for drought-resistant corn, when an email from my cousin landed in my inbox. Developers circling Abuela's farm again. She's refusing to meet with them, but they're persistent, offering buyouts all over the valley. Attached was a community newsletter featuring Westland Development's grand vision for Riverdale Valley, Sunset Estates, luxury living in the heart of nature. The digital rendering showed cookie-cutter mansions where family farms had stood for generations, complete with artificial lakes and a golf course. In the corner of the image, barely visible, was my grandmother's 80-acre farm replaced by what appeared to be a shopping center. I requested a leave of absence that same day. By the weekend, I had packed my apartment and headed home to the valley where 4 generations of my family had worked the land. Abuela Rosa was 85 when I returned, her body bent from decades of farming but her mind sharp as ever. She wasn't surprised to see me. You saw the vultures circling, she said, pouring me coffee at the warm kitchen table where she taught me to shell peas as a child. They think because I'm old, I'm ready to surrender. Are you? I asked. They're offering good money, Abuela. Her dark eyes flashed. This land fed our family when we had nothing else. Your grandfather and I paid for it acre by acre, season by season. What would we be without it? But the farm barely breaks even now, I said gently. The market for conventional crops. Conventional, she snorted. Your grandfather would laugh at that word. There was nothing conventional about how we farmed before the chemicals and the big tractors came. She took my hand, her skin papery against mine. The old ways are sleeping, Elena, not dead. That night, I walked the property alone. The moonlight illuminated fields that had once burst with diverse crops but now grew only commodity corn and soybeans. The soil, once rich and black, had thinned and paled from years of heavy pesticide use and monoculture farming practices I had helped develop and promote in my corporate role. In the far corner of the property stood a small wooden shed I remembered from childhood, my grandfather's seed sanctuary. With a flashlight borrowed from the house, I broke the rusted padlock and stepped inside. The air was dry and still, smelling faintly of dust and dried herbs. Along the walls stood dozens of glass jars, carefully labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. Morales tomato, 1972, Valley beans, 1968, Rosa's peppers, 1965. Heritage seeds, varieties my grandparents had saved and cultivated specifically for this valley, this soil, this climate, before industrial agriculture changed everything. I lifted a jar, wondering if any life still remained in these dormant treasures. The next morning, I presented Abuela with a proposition. Give me 3 years to revitalize the farm using sustainable methods and her traditional knowledge. If I failed, she could sell to the developers with my blessing. 3 years, she agreed. But I won't sell, even if you fail. I'll burn it to the ground first. Her smile told me she expected neither outcome. I began by testing the viability of my grandfather's seed collection. To my amazement, many varieties germinated in my makeshift greenhouse. From agronomists at my former university, I learned cutting-edge regenerative agriculture techniques that, ironically, complemented my grandparents' traditional methods. I sectioned off 5 acres for intensive restoration, composting, cover cropping, minimal tillage. The work was consuming, and for months I barely noticed the escalating pressure from Westland Development. Their representatives became regular visitors, each offering larger sums for the property. When monetary incentives failed, subtle threats began. Mentions of eminent domain, hints at water rights challenges, suggestions that an elderly woman couldn't possibly maintain proper environmental compliance. During this time, I also discovered something remarkable. In testing our soil against neighboring properties, I found that despite decades of conventional farming, portions of our land had maintained unusual microbial diversity. Something had protected it from the worst effects of agricultural chemicals. The answer came from Abuela Rosa during one of our evening sessions recording her agricultural knowledge. Your grandfather always kept the old ways in small places, she told me. The north field's border, the wet patch by the creek, the strip behind the shed. He planted the traditional companion plants there, just enough to keep the good insects, to feed the soil. He called them his seed guardians. These small, overlooked areas had preserved the soil microbiome that industrial agriculture had stripped from surrounding farms. It was our hidden advantage, the foundation upon which our restoration work could build more quickly. By the end of the first year, our 5-acre test plot was showing remarkable results. The heritage vegetable varieties, adapted through generations to our specific local conditions, thrived with minimal inputs once the soil began to recover. We established a small weekend farm stand, selling our produce directly to the community. Word spread. Neighbors began stopping by, first out of curiosity, then returning for the flavor of tomatoes they remembered from childhood, for beans that actually tasted like beans. Local chefs from farm-to-table restaurants in nearby towns made the drive to purchase our heirloom varieties. These peppers, one chef said, holding up a basket of my grandmother's distinctive twisted red chilies, I haven't seen these since my grandmother's kitchen. Where did you find them? They never left, I told him. They were just waiting. As interest grew, I began offering informal workshops on seed saving and regenerative techniques. To my surprise, many attendees were from neighboring farms, the same families who had been considering Westland's buyout offers. Marcus Green, whose family farm bordered ours to the east, pulled me aside after one such workshop. Elena, what you're doing here, it's making me reconsider. Westland offered us $1.2 million, but seeing what's possible with the old crops, the better methods, my kids are suddenly interested in farming again. This was an unexpected development. The children of farmers like me had been leaving the valley for decades. The average age of a Riverdale farmer was nearly 60. But now younger generations were showing renewed interest in a type of agriculture that connected to their heritage while incorporating modern sustainability science. By the second year, we had expanded our regeneration efforts to 20 acres. We installed a small processing facility in a converted barn, allowing us to create value-added products. Salsas from Abuela's peppers, dried beans and heritage varieties, cornmeal from traditional maize. Our profit per acre was 5 times what it had been under conventional methods, with significantly lower input costs. Westland Development noticed. Their representative, a slick executive named James Harrington, requested a meeting at our farm. Ms. Morales, he began, sitting uncomfortably at my grandmother's kitchen table, your experiment here is charming. But surely you understand it's not scalable. Sentimentality about old farming methods won't feed the world. I pushed a folder across the table, our financial projections and soil health metrics over 2 years. per acre profitability exceeding conventional methods by 380%, carbon sequestration rates that qualify for emerging climate credits, biodiversity increases documented by the state university. This isn't sentiment, Mr. Harrington, it's science. He barely glanced at the documents. Westland is prepared to offer $800,000 for the property, double our original offer. Your grandmother can live out her days in comfort. The farm is not for sale. His smile tightened. Perhaps you should consider the broader picture. Riverdale needs economic development, tax base expansion, jobs. Sunset Estates will bring prosperity to a declining agricultural community. Prosperity for whom? I asked. Not for the farming families who've been here for generations. Not for the ecosystem that supports this valley. Progress requires change, Ms. Morales. Fight it if you must, but Westland has secured options on nearly 70% of the properties we need. This development will proceed with or without your cooperation. After you left, I sat with Abuela in the garden, surrounded by plants grown from her saved seeds. The valley spread before us, green and golden in the afternoon light. 70%, I murmured. If that's true, we've already lost. She plucked a ripe tomato from the vine, its skin mottled with a distinctive pattern that made our family variety unique. When I first came to this valley as a young bride, the old women taught me something important. No harvest is guaranteed. Sometimes you plant, you tend, you pray, and still the crops fail. But always, always you save the seeds. Her words stayed with me as I spent the night reviewing property maps of the valley, marking which farms had likely signed options with Westland. By morning, a plan had begun to form, not to defeat the development directly, but to create something that would endure regardless. I called an emergency meeting of the farmers who had been attending our workshops. 20 families gathered in our barn that weekend, representing farms both large and small. Westland claims to have options on 70% of the valley, I began. Even if that's an exaggeration, we're facing the end of farming as we know it here. But we have something they don't value yet. I held up jars of heritage seeds, each adapted through generations to our specific valley. These varieties, combined with the regenerative methods we've been practicing, are uniquely suited to this land. They're drought-resistant, disease-resistant, and produce exceptional flavor with minimal inputs. And they're becoming increasingly valuable in the specialty food market. Marcus Green spoke up. My option with Westland expires in 6 months. Until then, I'm still farming my land. Exactly, I nodded. I'm proposing we create a seed and knowledge cooperative. Each participating farm dedicates 5 acres to growing out heritage varieties using regenerative methods. We share the seeds, techniques, and marketing resources. Most importantly, we create a legal structure that protects these agricultural assets regardless of land ownership. Sarah Johnson, whose family have farmed in the valley for 6 generations, looked skeptical. How does this help if we still lose our farms? Because the seeds and knowledge will survive, I explained. We create conservation easements on portions of our properties. We establish a land trust for farms that haven't signed options, and we prove, acre by acre, that our method of agriculture is more profitable and sustainable than what came before. Or what would come after, added Marcus. The Riverdale Heritage Seed Collective was born that day. Through the remainder of my 3-year commitment to Abuela, we expanded from individual resistance to coordinated action. University extension offices helped document our varieties. Legal aid organizations helped establish conservation easements. Chefs and food writers brought attention to the unique flavors and stories of our crops. By the time James Harrington returned to my grandmother's kitchen table, the landscape, both literal and figurative, had shifted. Your grandmother's farm is worthless, he declared, tossing soil samples onto my desk like they were evidence in a murder trial. Contaminated land, outdated infrastructure. We're being generous, offering $500,000. I studied him for a moment, noting the desperation behind his bravado. Their project was behind schedule. Investors were getting nervous. Contaminated? I echoed. That's interesting, considering our soil has been certified organic by the state. As for infrastructure, our processing facilities handled nearly $2 million in specialty crop products last year. Perhaps Westland's due diligence is as outdated as your understanding of modern sustainable agriculture. I handed him a thick folder, our counter-proposal from the Riverdale Heritage Seed Collective. 30 participating farms. conservation easements on key agricultural parcels, a certified seed bank of varieties uniquely adapted to this valley, and a sustainable agriculture training center that's already received grant funding. The economics are quite compelling. His face darkened as he skimmed the document. This changes nothing. We have binding options. On parcels now encumbered by conservation easements, I finished for him. Your legal team will explain the implications. But more importantly, you're facing a simple financial reality. Our cooperative's per-acre profitability now exceeds anything your development could generate in property tax revenue for the county. The county commissioners have unanimously approved our application for special agricultural district status. I interrupted again. It seems they're quite proud of Riverdale Valley becoming recognized as a center for agricultural innovation and food heritage. The governor is attending the designation ceremony next month. Harrington left without making further threats, and 2 weeks later, Westland Development announced they were re-evaluating the Sunset Estates project in light of emerging agricultural innovations in the region. Within a month, they had sold their options back to the original landowners at a significant loss. Today, 5 years after I returned to my grandmother's farm, the Riverdale Valley looks both familiar and transformed. Family farms still dominate the landscape, but now they're diversified, resilient, and increasingly operated by younger generations who have found purpose in connecting traditional knowledge with modern science. The Riverdale Heritage Seed Collective now includes 45 farms and manages over 2,000 acres of land dedicated to preserving and evolving heritage varieties. Our seed bank holds over 300 locally adapted vegetable, grain, and herb varieties, many saved by farm families for generations. Our training center hosts farmers from across the country who come to learn how traditional wisdom combined with regenerative science can revitalize rural communities. Abuela Rosa, now 90, still works in her garden daily. Last month, as we harvested this year's seed crops together, a group of agricultural students from the State University came to record her knowledge of companion planting and natural pest management, techniques her grandmother taught her, which science is now confirming as effective. You see, she told them, her hands deftly separating seeds from chaff. The old ways and the new ways, they are not enemies. They are like the corn and the beans and the squash that we plant together. Each one makes the others stronger. One student asked her if she was ever tempted by the developer's money, by the ease retirement could have brought after decades of physical labor. Abuela looked out across the fields where her heritage peppers grew alongside innovative companion crops, where solar panels powered efficient irrigation systems, where neighboring farmers worked land their families had tended for generations. What grows here is worth more than money, she said simply. It is the past and the future growing together in the same soil. Later, as the students departed and the evening settled around us, I walked with Abuela to the highest point on our farm. The valley spread below, a patchwork of fields and forests bathed in golden light. In the distance, a new barn was rising on the Johnson property, built to house their expanded seed-saving operation. When you came back, Abuela said, I thought you were here to save just our farm. I didn't realize you were planting something much bigger. I smiled, thinking of how my corporate agriculture career had once seemed like success, how I had nearly missed the true value of what my grandparents had preserved. The best seeds, I told her, echoing words she had spoken to me countless times, always contain more than we can see at first glance. She nodded, satisfied, as darkness slowly claimed the valley. Around us, invisible in the soil beneath our feet, billions of microorganisms continued their ancient work of renewal and regeneration. And in barns and homes throughout Riverdale, carefully labeled jars of seeds waited for another season, another generation, another chance to grow. They say never mix business with family, but when my brother stole my software architecture and pitched it as his own to our investors, he forgot one crucial detail. I had embedded a signature in the code that would reveal his betrayal exactly when he needed it most, during his pitch to secure $50 million in Series B funding. My name is Daniel Way, and until 3 months ago, I was the Chief Technology Officer at Quantum Cipher, a cybersecurity startup I co-founded with my brother Eric. We had built the company from nothing to a valuation of over $200 million in just under 4 years. Our encryption technology promised to revolutionize data security in an increasingly vulnerable digital landscape. The journey had been exhilarating, late nights fueled by caffeine and ambition, the rush of solving seemingly impossible problems, and the pride of creating something meaningful. Eric and I had always been competitive. Growing up as the children of Chinese immigrants in suburban Boston, excellence wasn't encouraged, it was expected. Our parents had sacrificed everything to give us opportunities in America, working double shifts at the restaurant they owned to pay for our education. While Eric excelled socially, becoming class president and captain of the debate team, I found my place in mathematics and computer science, often spending weekends at specialized programs while my peers attended parties. One brother to build it, one brother to sell it, our father would say proudly. The perfect combination. And for a while it was. Eric's charisma and business acumen complemented my technical expertise. He handled investors and media with natural grace, while I led our engineering team in developing our breakthrough encryption protocol. The arrangement worked until it didn't. The trouble began when Vanessa Chen joined our company as VP of Business Development. Brilliant, ambitious, and with connections throughout Silicon Valley, she was exactly what we needed to scale our business. Eric recruited her personally, convinced her expertise would help us secure the Series B funding we needed to expand internationally. "She's perfect for us, Daniel," he had insisted. Harvard MBA, experience at Google and Microsoft, and she believes in what we're building. What Eric didn't mention was their previous relationship. They had dated briefly during business school before going their separate ways. I discovered this only by accident, overhearing a conversation at our company holiday party. When confronted, Eric dismissed it as irrelevant. "Ancient history," he said with a laugh. "We're professionals. Besides, she's engaged to some venture capital guy now." I should have recognized the warning signs. The private meetings that didn't appear on any calendar, the sudden interest Eric took in the technical aspects of our product, the subtle changes in how decisions were being made. But I was focused on perfecting our technology, addressing the vulnerabilities our security team had identified in our latest audit. 3 months ago, I returned early from a cybersecurity conference in Singapore, having cut my trip short after a breakthrough idea for solving our persistent latency issue. It was nearly midnight when I reached the office, expecting to find it empty. Instead, I saw light coming from our main conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Eric and Vanessa huddled over a laptop, surrounded by technical diagrams that looked suspiciously like my preliminary designs for our next-generation architecture. When I entered, they jumped apart like guilty teenagers. "Daniel." Eric recovered quickly. "You're back early. We were just reviewing some materials for the investor presentation next month." At midnight, I asked, noting how Vanessa subtly closed the laptop. "The best work happens after hours," she said smoothly. Eric was helping me understand the technical infrastructure in more detail. Investors always drill down on the technology. I nodded, watching as Eric gathered the diagrams into a folder. "Those look like my working designs for the distributed node architecture." "Just making copies," Eric said, sliding the folder into his messenger bag. "You know how thorough Vanessa likes to be with preparation." Something felt wrong, but I couldn't place it. These were people I trusted implicitly, my brother and our hand-picked executive. I pushed my suspicions aside, attributing them to travel fatigue and the perpetual stress of startup life. 1 week later, Eric suggested a new division of responsibilities in preparation for our upcoming funding round. "We need to specialize more as we scale," he explained during our weekly leadership meeting. "Daniel, you should focus exclusively on current product development and stability. Vanessa and I will handle the future roadmap and investor relations." "The future roadmap is built on the architectural changes I'm developing," I pointed out. "We can't separate them." "We're not separating them," Vanessa interjected. "We're just streamlining communication. Investors don't need all the technical details, they need a clear, compelling vision." The vote was 3-1. Our CFO, always more aligned with Eric's vision than mine, sided with them. I was effectively boxed out of investor presentations and strategic planning, relegated to maintaining our existing systems while my brother and Vanessa shaped the company's future. My suspicions grew when I noticed Eric had revoked my access to certain company repositories. When questioned, he cited security compartmentalization as we approached our funding round. It made little sense. I had architected our entire system. If anyone should have comprehensive access, it was me. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. Michael Zhang, one of our senior engineers who had been with us since the beginning, requested a private meeting off-site. "I thought you should know," he said hesitantly as we sat in a quiet corner of a coffee shop 2 blocks from our office. "Eric and Vanessa have been meeting with the engineering team individually. They're gathering all your design documentation, asking detailed questions about your methods. They're doing due diligence for investors," I suggested, still reluctant to believe the worst. Michael shook his head. "No, Daniel. They're positioning Eric as the true technical visionary behind Quantum Cipher. They've been rewriting the company history. According to the new narrative, you implemented Eric's architectural vision. You didn't create it." The betrayal felt physical, like a blow to the chest. My own brother was attempting to erase my contributions, to recast himself as the technical genius behind our success. It wasn't just about ego, it was about fundamentally misrepresenting our company to investors and the market. That night, I accessed our systems remotely, using administrator credentials only I possessed. What I found confirmed my worst fears: a completely revised investor presentation that minimized my role to early implementation support, with Eric prominently featured as the architectural visionary behind our technology. More disturbing still, I discovered emails between Eric and Vanessa discussing a post-funding reorganization that would move me to an advisory role with no operational authority. They planned to push me out of the company I had helped build from nothing. I considered my options carefully. A public confrontation would damage the company and potentially torpedo our funding round, hurting our employees and customers. Legal action would be prolonged and messy, with no guaranteed outcome. I needed a solution that would reveal the truth while preserving what we had built. Then I remembered something I had implemented years ago, when we first founded the company. In our core encryption protocol, I had embedded a digital signature, a cryptographic proof of authorship that linked the fundamental architecture to my identity. It was standard practice in advanced cryptography, a way to verify authentic authorship while maintaining open-source principles. The signature wasn't hidden, exactly. It was hiding in plain sight, visible to anyone who knew exactly where to look and how to decode it. If activated during a demonstration, it would display my name and timestamp as the architectural creator, irrefutable evidence embedded in the very technology Eric was claiming as his own. I made my decision. Rather than confronting Eric directly, I would let him continue with his plan. The investor presentation was scheduled as a live demonstration of our next-generation architecture, the perfect stage for the truth to reveal itself. For the next 2 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I attended meetings, responded to technical questions, and gave no indication that I was aware of the betrayal in progress. Eric grew increasingly confident, even condescending in his interactions with me. "Don't worry about the Sanderson Venture Partners presentation," he said the day before the big meeting. "Vanessa and I have it covered. Just make sure the demo environment is stable." "Of course," I replied, hiding my anger behind a mask of professional courtesy. "Everything's prepared." The morning of the presentation arrived. Our conference room was filled with partners from Sanderson Venture Partners, one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious firms. If successful, their investment would value Quantum Cipher at over $500 million. I sat quietly at the back of the room as Eric began his presentation, watching him smoothly take credit for innovations that had kept me awake for months, for architectural insights that had come to me during countless solitary hours of work. Vanessa stood beside him, occasionally adding market context to his technical claims. "The distributed node architecture you're about to see represents a fundamental rethinking of encryption protocols," Eric explained confidently. "I developed this approach to solve the inherent vulnerabilities in traditional encryption methods." He nodded to our technical team to begin the live demonstration. On the large screen behind him, our system initialized, displaying the elegant minimalist interface I had designed. Everything seemed to be proceeding according to plan, his plan. Then, as the core protocol activated, something unexpected happened. A small window appeared in the corner of the screen, expanding rapidly to display a message. "Architectural avgt anti-Kajion protostila activated. Primary Architecture by Daniel W. A. TIMEST 06-12-2019. Unauthorized Attribution GTTTD." The room fell silent. Eric froze mid-sentence, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion to barely concealed panic. "What is this?" asked Catherine Sanderson, the managing partner at Sanderson Venture Partners. "A security feature," I said, standing up from my seat at the back of the room. "One I implemented when I designed this architecture 3 years ago. It's a cryptographic proof of authorship, standard practice, and secure systems development." Eric attempted to recover. Daniel worked on early implementations, of course. We all contributed. "The timestamp and cryptographic signature are immutable, Eric," I interrupted calmly. "They're embedded in the core protocol. You can't change them without breaking the entire system." What followed was the most uncomfortable 30 minutes of my professional life. With the evidence undeniable, Eric and Vanessa were forced to admit their deception. The Sanderson partners, initially angry at being misled, eventually appreciated the irony. A security company whose own technology had secured the truth about its creation. "We invest in integrity as much as innovation," Catherine Sanderson said as the meeting concluded. "We're still interested in quantum cipher, but we need to understand the actual leadership structure and contribution history before proceeding." In the aftermath, our board of directors called an emergency meeting. Eric and Vanessa were placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. 2 weeks later, both resigned rather than face formal dismissal. I was appointed interim CEO while the board conducted a search for permanent leadership. The funding round eventually closed, though at a somewhat lower valuation than originally projected. More importantly, Quantum Cipher survived with its core technology and team intact. Eric and I haven't spoken since that day. Our parents, devastated by the rift between their sons, have tried unsuccessfully to mediate a reconciliation. Perhaps someday that will be possible, but the wound remains too fresh, the betrayal too profound. Yesterday, I received an email from Eric, the first communication since his resignation. It contained only a single line. "You always were too clever for your own good." I didn't respond. Some messages don't require an answer. As for Quantum Cipher, we're thriving under new leadership. I returned to my role as CTO, happier focusing on technology than corporate politics. Our Series C funding closed last month, validating both our business model and our commitment to integrity. The experience taught me something valuable. In business as in programming, it's wise to build in safeguards, not out of paranoia, but pragmatism. People may surprise you, and not always pleasantly. The right validation check, implemented quietly but effectively, can be the difference between vulnerability and security. Sometimes the most important code you write isn't the one that runs your business, it's the one that protects your legacy when others try to rewrite your story. Acquisition terms are final, my stepbrother announced, sliding the contract across the boardroom table with a satisfied smile. "Congratulations, Rebecca. You built something worth stealing." He didn't realize I had leveraged his ambition against him, and that his signature on those documents had just transferred controlling interests of his family's century-old publishing empire directly to me. I am Rebecca Chen, though professionally I've always used my mother's surname Harlow. At 34, I'm the founder and CEO of Artemis Digital, a boutique digital media company specializing in revitalizing traditional print publications for the modern era. 5 years ago, we were a struggling startup. Today, we're the acquisition target of Lancaster Publishing, the company that should have been partly mine by birthright. My history with Lancaster Publishing began when I was 12, the year my mother married Richard Lancaster, CEO and majority shareholder of the publishing dynasty founded by his grandfather. A widower with a 16-year-old son, Richard welcomed me into their sprawling Boston home with genuine warmth. His son, Alexander, made his feelings clear on my first night under their roof. "Don't get comfortable," he whispered as he passed me in the hallway. "You're not a real Lancaster. You'll never have a place here." Despite Alex's hostility, I found unexpected joy in my new life. Richard became the father I'd never had, encouraging my interest in literature and journalism, bringing me to the office on weekends to explore the vast archives of Lancaster's century of publications. While Alex was groomed to take over the company, attending board meetings, shadowing executives, I absorbed everything from the ground up, learning from editors, designers, and the digital team that was just beginning to grapple with the internet's disruption of traditional publishing. When Richard died unexpectedly during my second year of college, everything changed. Alex, newly graduated from Harvard Business School, took control of Lancaster Publishing with his inheritance of 60% of company shares. My mother received 10%, with the remaining 30% distributed among long-term executives and a family trust. At the memorial service, Alex made his first executive decision. "We're selling the brownstone," he informed my mother and me. "The company is providing you a settlement. I expect you want your own place." The settlement was generous financially but devastating emotionally. Within a month, we were removed from the family home and effectively erased from the Lancaster narrative. My mother, heartbroken, retreated to her hometown in California. I stayed in Boston, determined to finish my degree in digital media and communications. 2 weeks after graduation, I received a certified letter. Lancaster Publishing was formally declining my application for their management training program. No explanation was given, but none was needed. Alex had made good on his promise. I would have no place in what should have been my family's company. Instead, I joined a struggling digital media startup, working 18-hour days to help transform traditional content for online audiences. When that company was acquired 2 years later, I used my small windfall to found Artemis Digital, focusing on a niche Alex and others in traditional publishing overlooked, revitalizing legacy publications with dedicated but aging readerships. Our model was different from the slash and burn approach of most digital transformations. We preserved editorial quality while creating sustainable digital revenue streams, respecting the core identity of each publication while making it viable for the future. We started small: literary journals, regional magazines, specialized industry publications, but our reputation grew as each project succeeded where others had failed. Throughout those years, I kept tabs on Lancaster Publishing through industry connections and my mother's small ownership stake, which provided annual reports. Under Alex's leadership, the company aggressively expanded its portfolio but struggled to adapt to digital disruption. Prestigious titles were gutted to cut costs, digital strategies shifted with every new consultant, and the company's reputation for editorial excellence deteriorated. Our paths crossed occasionally at industry events. Alex always greeted me with the same condescending smile. "Still playing with websites, Rebecca? How cute." He never bothered to learn what Artemis actually did, viewing digital media as beneath the dignity of true publishing, something to be delegated to subordinates while real executives made decisions about print and distribution. 3 years into building Artemis, I acquired a struggling but beloved literary magazine called the Inkwell Review. Founded in 1923 and known for publishing early works by some of America's most celebrated authors. Though its circulation had dwindled to just 15,000 subscribers, its archives and contributor relationships were invaluable. What I didn't know when making the purchase was that the Inkwell Review had once been owned by Lancaster Publishing, sold off by Alex in one of his first executive decisions as part of streamlining underperforming assets. 6 months after our acquisition, during a digitization project of the magazine's archives, our team discovered something extraordinary: a sealed envelope in the magazine's original incorporation documents, labeled for transfer of ownership only. Inside was an addendum to the original purchase agreement when Lancaster Publishing had acquired the Inkwell Review in 1967. The document stipulated that if Lancaster ever sold the magazine, a dormant ownership stake in Lancaster Publishing, 3% held in trust by the magazine's original family owners, would be included in the transaction. Alex had sold the Inkwell Review to a private investor for a nominal sum, who then sold it to another party and eventually to Artemis. But none of the subsequent transactions had acknowledged or transferred the 3% ownership stake. According to our attorneys, the stake had legally transferred with each sale, meaning Artemis now owned 3% of Lancaster Publishing. This discovery coincided with a financial crisis at Lancaster. Years of declining print revenue and failed digital initiatives had left the company overextended, with several banks calling in loans. Industry rumors suggested they were seeking emergency investment or considering selling premier assets. I saw an opportunity not just for business advantage, but for a reckoning. Through careful, quiet maneuvering over the next year, Artemis Digital achieved 3 key objectives. First, we acquired 2 more publications previously sold off by Lancaster, each with similar dormant ownership stakes, bringing our total ownership in Lancaster Publishing to 7%. Second, we formed a strategic partnership with my mother, creating a voting trust that combined her 10% ownership with Artemis's 7%. Third, and most importantly, we positioned Artemis Digital as a potential acquisition target for Lancaster Publishing, leaking data about our remarkable success in digital transformation and revenue growth to industry publications. The bait was set, and Alex, predictably, took it. Always looking for quick fixes rather than structural change, he saw acquiring a successful digital media company as a way to appease his board and creditors without having to transform Lancaster's fundamental operations. When the acquisition offer came, I feigned reluctance, insisting on a premium valuation and specific terms that would give me oversight of digital strategy. Alex, believing he could sideline me after the acquisition was complete, agreed to all conditions without thorough due diligence. Which brings us to today, the final signing of acquisition documents in Lancaster Publishing's mahogany panel boardroom. Alex sitting at the head of the table where his father once sat, sliding papers toward me with that same dismissive smile he'd worn since we were teenagers. Acquisition terms are final, he announced. Congratulations, Rebecca, you built something worth stealing. I signed the documents without comment, then watched as he did the same. Now, he continued, as discussed, you'll lead our new digital division, reporting directly to our Chief Operating Officer. We've prepared an announcement about Lancaster Publishing's expansion into digital media through the strategic acquisition. That won't be necessary, I replied, nodding to my attorney, who distributed folders to everyone present. I've prepared my own announcement. Alex frowned, opening the folder. What is this? The complete record of ownership transfers of the Inkwell Review and 2 other publications, along with the original trust documents establishing their connected ownership stakes in Lancaster Publishing. Combined with my mother's shares, we now control 17% of Lancaster Publishing. His face paled. This is absurd. Our legal team would have. Your legal team did review these publications before you sold them, I interrupted. But they failed to recognize the significance of provisions hidden in original acquisition agreements from the 1960s. The evidence is irrefutable and has been verified by 3 independent law firms. The Lancaster executives exchanged alarmed glances as my attorney continued. Furthermore, the terms of the acquisition you just signed include a share exchange that effectively converts Artemis Digital's private shares into Lancaster Publishing voting shares, with a 3-year lockup period preventing executive leadership from selling their positions. You can't possibly. With the additional shares created through the acquisition terms you just approved, our voting position increases to 23%, I continued calmly, combined with the 12% held by board members who have already pledged their support for new leadership. We now control 35% of voting shares. According to Lancaster's bylaws, that's sufficient to call for a vote of no confidence in current management. The color had completely drained from Alex's face. This is a hostile takeover. No, Alex. This is a correction. You've systematically destroyed what your grandfather and father built. Lancaster's market value has declined 60% under your leadership. 4 of your flagship publications are on the verge of bankruptcy. The company has lost its editorial direction and failed to establish any coherent digital strategy. I closed my folder and looked directly at him. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you prepare a transition plan. You planned this from the beginning, he said, his voice hollow with shock. All those years. Not from the beginning, I corrected him. I didn't plan anything until you made it clear there would never be a place for me in this company, despite what your father wanted. You taught me an important lesson, Alex. Blood may be thicker than water, but ink, contracts, written words, legal documents, ink is thicker than blood. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The board voted overwhelmingly to remove Alex from his position as CEO, installing me as interim chief executive while a search committee identified permanent leadership. I had no intention of running Lancaster Publishing long-term. My passion remained with Artemis Digital and our model of thoughtful transformation, but I needed to stabilize the company and establish new strategic direction. Alex disappeared to his summer home in the Hamptons, refusing all communication. Most of his executive team resigned or were dismissed as the full extent of mismanagement became clear. The company's financial situation was even worse than industry rumors had suggested, with several signature publications literally weeks away from collapse. I assembled a transition team combining Lancaster veterans who had been sidelined under Alex's leadership with digital strategists from Artemis. Together, we developed a 3-year recovery plan focused on preserving editorial quality while creating sustainable digital revenue models. Exactly the approach that had succeeded at Artemis, but at much larger scale. 6 months into the transformation, Lancaster Publishing held its annual holiday party at the Boston Public Library, a tradition my stepfather had established decades earlier. As I stood addressing the gathered employees, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me there. Publishing has never been about platforms, I told them. Whether words appear on paper or screens, what matters is their quality, their integrity, and their impact. Lancaster's century of excellence was built on understanding that content creates the relationship with readers. Everything else is just delivery. We lost sight of that fundamental truth for a while, but we're finding our way back. After the speech, as I circulated among staff, a senior editor who had worked with my stepfather approached. "Richard would be proud," she said, touching my arm. "He always told me you understood publishing in your bones," said you reminded him of his father, the original Lancaster who built all this. "Thank you," I replied, unexpectedly moved. "I wish he could see what we're building now." "Oh, he sees," she smiled. "And so does someone else." She nodded toward the entrance, where Alex stood awkwardly, looking out of place in the company he had led for nearly a decade. I crossed the room to meet him, unsure what to expect. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. "I almost didn't." He looked around the room, at the animated conversations between print editors and digital strategists, at the displays showcasing both heritage publications and new digital initiatives. "You've changed things." "We had to. The company was dying." He nodded slowly. "I received the quarterly reports. The digital subscription numbers are impressive." Coming from Alex, this qualified as effusive praise. We stood in awkward silence for a moment. "I never gave you a chance," he finally said. "From the beginning, I saw you as a threat. The way Dad looked at you. He never looked at me that way. He was proud of you too, Alex. He just showed it differently." "Maybe." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about what you said, about ink being thicker than blood. You were right about the contracts, but wrong about what matters most. Dad built this company for family. Whatever our differences, that's what we are." He extended his hand, offering a small leather-bound book. "This was his personal journal from the year he married your mother. I thought you should have it." I accepted the journal, unexpectedly touched by the gesture. "Thank you." "I'm starting something new," he continued. "A publishing consultancy, smaller scale, focused on areas I actually understand. I'd like your advice sometime, if you're willing." It wasn't an apology, exactly, but from Alex, it represented significant evolution. "I'd be happy to talk," I replied. "Families should help each other." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Alex, there will always be a place for you at Lancaster, when you're ready." He nodded once, then disappeared into the December evening. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible after so many years of animosity, but the company Richard Lancaster had built deserved to have both his children involved in its future, each contributing their distinct strengths. The journal Alex had given me felt significant in my hands, a piece of family history passing from one generation to the next. Later that night, alone in my office overlooking Boston Harbor, I opened Richard's journal. Inside the cover, he had written a single line that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Family is not defined by blood alone, but by those who preserve our stories. In publishing as in families, what endures is not who owns the legacy, but who honors it, who ensures that the stories and values continue to matter in a changing world." By those measures, Lancaster Publishing was in good hands, regardless of whose name appeared on the masthead. Sometimes the most meaningful victories aren't about winning control, but about restoring purpose. Ink may secure ownership, but only vision preserves legacy. The day my husband introduced me as his little homemaker to the board of directors at his company's gala, I smiled politely while mentally reviewing the evidence I compiled proving I was the true architect of his most successful business innovations. In 2 months, I would present my patent applications and business records to his stunned executive team. But tonight I would play my part one final time. I am a Liz Harrington, but most people in the business world know me only as the wife of Robert Harrington, founder and CEO of Pinnacle Solutions. My academic credentials, a PhD in computer science from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard, have been reduced to framed certificates gathering dust in our home office, replaced by the role of corporate spouse and hostess extraordinaire. When I met Robert, I was leading a promising AI research team at a technology incubator in Silicon Valley. He pursued me relentlessly, not just romantically but intellectually. "Your mind is extraordinary," he would say over late-night discussions about algorithmic efficiency and market applications. Together, we could build something revolutionary. I believed him. I believed we would be partners in every sense of the word. That belief led me to marry him after a whirlwind 8-month courtship, and subsequently to integrate my research with his business ventures. Looking back, I can map precisely how skillfully he executed his strategy of appropriation. The first project was collaborative, at least superficially. We developed a predictive analytics engine that became Pinnacle's flagship product. Robert handled the business development and investor relations. I architected the technical solution. When the press coverage emerged, I was conspicuously absent from the narrative. "A technical team under my direction," he would say in interviews, never mentioning that the team consisted primarily of his wife. "It's better for investor confidence," he explained when I questioned him. "They want to see a strong, singular vision. We know the truth, and that's what matters." I accepted this reasoning, focusing instead on our next innovation. Each time, the pattern repeated. My work, his acclaim. Over 5 years, I watched my contributions systematically erased from the company's history, my role reduced to supportive spouse in the official narrative. The wake-up call came during an evening when I overheard Robert speaking with Gregory Phillips, his chief financial officer and longtime friend, in his home office. I had come to discuss a breakthrough in our latest project, but paused outside the door upon hearing my name. "Elise is getting restless again," Robert said, talking about wanting more acknowledgement for her contributions. I could hear the dismissive quotation marks around the word. Gregory's laugh was uncomfortable. "You have to admit, Rob, the core algorithms were her design. The Hanover contract wouldn't have happened without her innovations. The concepts may have come from her research, but I'm the one who made them viable," Robert replied. "She's a theoretical academic, I'm a businessman. Ideas without execution are worthless." Still, Gregory persisted. "Maybe give her some formal role. Technical advisor or something. The board might actually." "The board follows my lead," Robert interrupted. "Besides, we have a good arrangement. She gets the lifestyle and security she wants, and I get to run my company without complications. The prenup ensures she'll never have any real claim on Pinnacle's assets. Why mess with a system that works?" I stood frozen outside that door, a proposal for our newest project clutched in my hand as the full reality of my situation crystallized. I wasn't a partner, I was an asset, a resource to be mined for valuable ideas, then kept comfortable but contained. That night, I began planning my response, not an emotional confrontation, but a strategic reframing of our relationship. If Robert saw our marriage as a business arrangement, I would approach it with corresponding pragmatism. First, I established independent documentation of my work. For each project I had contributed to at Pinnacle, I compiled comprehensive records, initial concept documents, development notes, testing protocols, all meticulously time-stamped and authenticated. I stored these records securely away from our home systems, which Robert's IT team maintained. Next, I consulted with a patent attorney, not one affiliated with Robert's extensive business network, but a specialist from another state recommended by a former colleague. Under her guidance, I began filing patent applications for my most recent innovations, careful to focus on concepts not yet implemented in Pinnacle's products. For 18 months, I maintained the appearance of the devoted corporate wife while systematically building my position. I opened separate financial accounts, reconnected with professional contacts, and quietly consulted on projects unrelated to Pinnacle's business, all while continuing to provide Robert with the brilliant innovations he had come to depend on. The most difficult part was suppressing my natural inclination to confront the injustice directly. Each time Robert presented my work as his own, each time he introduced me as an ornamental afterthought at corporate functions, I smiled and played my role while mentally cataloging the incident as further evidence. The culmination of my strategy came at Pinnacle's annual Innovation Showcase, an event where Robert traditionally announced the company's breakthrough developments to industry analysts and major clients. This year's centerpiece was to be an adaptive security protocol that promised to revolutionize data protection for enterprise clients, a system I had designed from concept to implementation. I sat in the front row as Robert took the stage, watching him prepare to claim sole credit for my work one final time. As he began his presentation, an assistant handed him a legal document. From my seat, I could see his expression shift from confusion to disbelief as he read the notice of patent approval. My patent approval for the very technology he was about to present. "Is there a problem, Robert?" I asked when he looked up and met my eyes. The remainder of the event was a masterclass in corporate damage control. Robert recovered quickly, announcing a strategic partnership with a new security firm, a shell company I had established months earlier as the holder of my patents. The analysts were intrigued by this unexpected development. The Pinnacle executives were visibly confused. In the aftermath, Robert demanded a private meeting. We sat across from each other in the Pinnacle conference room, the same room where my ideas had been harvested for years without acknowledgement. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice tightly controlled. "Establishing appropriate valuation for my contributions," I replied calmly. "Just good business practice. We're married. Your work at Pinnacle was part of our partnership. A partnership suggests equal recognition and shared benefit. You've presented my work as yours for 5 years while reducing me to a decorative accessory in the company narrative." He leaned forward, switching tactics. "Whatever issues you have with credit attribution, we can work them out. But filing patents independently crosses a line, Elise. It's practically corporate espionage." "One cannot steal what rightfully belongs to oneself," I countered. "Every patent I filed is for my own original work, meticulously documented and legally distinct from Pinnacle's implemented products. I've been careful not to violate any proprietary rights. The prenuptial agreement covers marital assets and your ownership stake in Pinnacle. It does not entitle you to my intellectual property created independent of company resources." I slid a folder across the table. "My attorneys have reviewed the contract thoroughly. You might want your team to do the same." The negotiation that followed lasted weeks. Robert oscillated between threats of litigation, attempts at emotional manipulation, and finally surprisingly reasonable settlement offers. The board of directors, once they understood the situation, recognized the precarious position Robert had created for the company. Having my innovations suddenly under independent control represented an existential threat to Pinnacle's product roadmap. In the end, we reached an agreement that benefited all parties. I would become Pinnacle's chief innovation officer, with full acknowledgement of my prior and ongoing contributions. My patents would be licensed to Pinnacle under favorable terms, but I would retain ownership. The company's historical records would be amended to accurately reflect my role in its foundational technologies. Our marriage, however, did not survive the renegotiation. The trust had been irrevocably broken, not just by Robert's systematic appropriation of my work, but by the fundamental dishonesty about what our partnership meant. The divorce was surprisingly amicable, perhaps because Robert recognized the vulnerability of his position if we couldn't reach a reasonable settlement. 2 years have passed since then. Pinnacle continues to thrive, now with my name properly attached to the innovations that drive its success. Robert and I maintain a professional relationship that is cordial, if not warm. The industry publications that once described me only as Robert Harrington's wife now reference my technical contributions and leadership role. Yesterday, a young female engineer approached me after I gave a keynote address at an industry conference. "I've been following your work since you were publicly recognized as the architect behind Pinnacle's core technologies," she said. "But I've always wondered, why did you wait so long to claim credit? You must have known the value of what you were creating." I considered her question carefully before answering. I believed in a partnership that didn't exist. By the time I recognized the reality, extricating myself required strategic patience. Sometimes reclaiming your value means first documenting it beyond dispute. Wasn't it infuriating, watching someone else take credit for your innovations year after year? Of course, I acknowledged, but I channeled that frustration into meticulous preparation. Anger might have prompted a confrontation I wasn't positioned to win. She nodded thoughtfully. "So you played the long game." I recognize that in business, as in chess, the winning strategy sometimes requires allowing your opponent to believe they're in control until they've overlooked your actual position on the board. As I watched her walk away, I reflected on how different my journey might have been had I understood earlier the importance of safeguarding my contributions. Now, as I mentor young innovators, particularly women, I emphasize this lesson. Partnership requires mutual recognition and respect, not just shared ambition. And when that respect is absent, the solution isn't immediate confrontation, but strategic reposition. The irony doesn't escape me that Robert's greatest business miscalculation was undervaluing his most important asset. In treating me as a silent partner rather than an acknowledged collaborator, he ultimately lost both my personal commitment and exclusive access to my professional innovations. Next month, I'm launching an independent research initiative focused on ethical applications of AI in healthcare, a field I've wanted to explore since my graduate studies, but set aside to support Pinnacle's commercial priorities. For the first time in nearly a decade, my name alone will appear on the founding documents. There's a particular satisfaction in seeing your own signature on something you've built, a satisfaction I had forgotten during those years in the shadows. Robert taught me an invaluable lesson, though surely not the one he intended. True partnership cannot exist without equality of recognition. In business and in life, we must insist upon proper valuation of our contributions, or create spaces where that value is self-evident. Sometimes the most powerful position in a negotiation is the one you build for yourself when others aren't paying attention. Your signature is on the prenup, Meredith. My lawyer says I get to keep everything. James tossed the document across the mahogany table with a smirk. Little did he know I'd spent the last 6 months meticulously documenting his financial fraud, and the FBI agent sitting in my car outside was about to make our divorce negotiations far more interesting than he had planned. 3 years earlier, I'd been Meredith Chen, rising star at Morgan Stanley with an MBA from Wharton and a corner office with a view of Manhattan. Now I was Meredith Reynolds, trophy wife to tech CEO James Reynolds, relegated to planning dinner parties and looking presentable at corporate functions. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but through a series of small compromises that eventually erased the ambitious woman I once was. We met at an investment conference where I was representing my firm. James approached after my presentation, all charm and intelligent questions. At 42, he was 12 years my senior, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had built something substantial. His company, Nexus Technologies, was making waves in enterprise software, and our conversation about valuation models and market penetration strategy extended into dinner. Most women's eyes glaze over when I talk about scalable infrastructure, he said, refilling my wine glass. You not only understand it, you've challenged 3 of my assumptions. I find that incredibly attractive. I was flattered, of course, and impressed by his apparent respect for my professional acumen. His courtship was deliberate and thoughtful. Tickets to the symphony, discussions about books we both enjoyed, cooking classes where we laughed over our mutual incompetence with pastry dough. When he proposed 8 months later, I accepted without hesitation. The warning signs emerged slowly after the wedding. James suggested I scaled back my hours at work when his business trips became more frequent. I need you at the Henderson dinner on Thursday, he'd say. They're potential investors. Can't you delegate that project to someone else? Each time I acquiesced, something small died inside me. When I finally expressed my frustration, his response was both gentle and undermining. Darling, you don't need to prove yourself anymore. My company's valuation hit $800 million last quarter. We're set for life. Why stress yourself for a paycheck you don't need? 6 months later, I resigned from my position. James was delighted. Now you can focus on what really matters, he said, without specifying what that might be. What followed was my slow disappearance. I became a corporate wife, arranging our social calendar, overseeing renovations of our Connecticut home, and standing beside James at events, smiling and making appropriate conversation with the spouses of other executives, while the important people discussed business matters. I suggested starting a family, thinking children might fill the growing emptiness, but James was dismissive. Not yet. The company's at a crucial growth stage. I need to focus. The first concrete evidence of his infidelity came in the form of a hotel receipt accidentally left in his suit pocket. The Four Seasons, a Thursday night when he claimed to be in Chicago. The room service order included 2 breakfast entrees. When confronted, he didn't bother denying it. It's just physical, Meredith. It doesn't mean anything. You've been so distant lately. Somehow, I had become the problem. My distance had driven him to seek comfort elsewhere. I swallowed my pride and suggested marriage counseling. He agreed, attended 2 sessions, then began finding excuses to miss appointments. The real breaking point came when I discovered that James had opened accounts in my name and used them for questionable transactions. I found the evidence while organizing tax documents, statements from banks I'd never heard of, with withdrawals and deposits that made no sense for our household. When I questioned him, his demeanor changed completely. "You shouldn't be digging through financial matters you don't understand," he snapped. "Just stick to planning the Christmas party." That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling and finally seeing my marriage clearly for what it was, a gilded cage. The next morning, I began my careful exit strategy. First, I consulted a divorce attorney, discreetly paying in cash for my personal savings that James knew nothing about. Then I started gathering evidence, not just of his affairs, which were merely symptoms, but of the financial irregularities that appeared increasingly suspicious the more I investigated. I leveraged old contacts from my banking days, friends who were happy to provide guidance without asking too many questions. What emerged was a pattern of activity that suggested James was using shell companies to hide assets and potentially engaging in securities fraud related to his position at Nexus. For 6 months, I played the dutiful wife while building my case. I restored my professional connections, quietly laid groundwork for financial independence, and meticulously documented everything. Then I contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission through their whistleblower program. The day I told James I wanted a divorce, he laughed. Actually laughed. "On what grounds?" he asked, amused at my apparent naivety. "Irreconcilable differences would be the kindest option," I replied evenly. His amusement faded to irritation. "You've signed a prenuptial agreement, Meredith. You'll get the settlement outlined there and nothing more. Don't make this unpleasant." 2 weeks later, we sat in our attorney's conference room for preliminary discussions. James was accompanied by Martin Schiff, his longtime legal counsel and friend. I brought Diane Keating, a partner at a top divorce firm known for representing women in high net worth cases. Before we begin, James said, sliding the prenuptial agreement across the table, "Let's establish what we're talking about here. According to paragraph 12, in the event of a divorce initiated by either party before the 10-year mark, Meredith receives a one-time payment of $2 million. No alimony, no property division." Diane took the document, reviewed it briefly, then placed it in her folder without comment. "My client is prepared to be reasonable," she said calmly. "However, there are some matters that may affect the validity of this agreement." James and Martin exchanged confident glances. "The prenup is ironclad," Martin insisted. "Drafted by me personally, properly executed, fully disclosed financials. There are no grounds for contestation." "Perhaps," Diane continued, unfazed. "But there is the matter of the fraudulent financial disclosures." James stiffened slightly but maintained his composure. "I disclosed everything required by law at the time of execution. Any subsequent changes in my financial status are irrelevant to the agreement's validity." "I'm not referring to omissions," I interjected, speaking directly to James. "I'm referring to the shell companies you created to hide assets, the accounts you opened in my name without my knowledge, the misrepresentations to Nexus investors about company performance." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" I nodded to Diane, who removed a thick file from her briefcase and placed it on the table. "We have documentation of at least $18 million in hidden assets, plus evidence of multiple securities violations. Special Agent Thomas from the FBI is very interested in discussing these matters with you." "This is absurd," Martin sputtered. "You're making baseless accusations to try to leverage a better settlement." "If they're baseless," I replied, "then you have nothing to worry about. But the SEC disagrees, and they've opened a formal investigation based on the evidence I provided through their whistleblower program." James stared at me, his expression shifting from shock to fury. "You wouldn't dare. You'll go down with me if there's any truth to this." No, I won't, I said calmly. I've been granted immunity in exchange for my cooperation, and the agents have already subpoenaed your personal and business records. The room fell silent. Martin whispered urgently to James, who seemed suddenly diminished, his confident posture collapsing into something closer to panic. What do you want? He finally asked. A fair settlement, I responded. 50% of all marital assets, the legitimate ones, and sole ownership of the Connecticut house. No alimony, clean break. And if I refuse, then we proceed to discovery, where your financial dealings will be thoroughly examined by the court. Simultaneously, the federal investigation will move forward. Your investors will likely learn of the SEC's interest in Nexus, which I imagine would affect the company's valuation rather dramatically. Martin pulled James aside for a hushed consultation. When they returned to the table, James was visibly shaken. We'll need time to prepare a counteroffer, Martin announced stiffly. Take all the time you need, Diane smiled. But be aware that the FBI has already scheduled an interview with Mr. Reynolds for Thursday morning. It might be advantageous to resolve our matters before that meeting takes place. As we gathered our materials to leave, James grabbed my arm. Why are you doing this? Was I really such a terrible husband? I looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of the man I thought I had married. You didn't consider me a partner, James. You wanted an accessory, not a wife. And when you involved me in your fraud by using my identity, you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I gave you everything, he hissed. No, I corrected him. You took everything from me, my career, my independence, my self-respect. I'm simply taking it back. The settlement was finalized in record time. James transferred assets worth $22 million to me, far more than the prenup's $2 million provision, and signed over the Connecticut property without argument. In exchange, I agreed not to voluntarily provide additional information to investigators beyond what I had already submitted. It wasn't a clean victory. The SEC investigation proceeded regardless, and 6 months later, James was indicted on multiple charges of securities fraud and financial misrepresentation. Nexus Technologies' stock plummeted, and James was forced to resign as CEO. The man who had once commanded rooms with his presence now appeared haggard and diminished in courthouse photographs. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that I had escaped and regret for the years I had surrendered my identity to become someone's idea of a perfect wife. I sold the Connecticut house and moved back to Manhattan, renting a modest apartment in Chelsea while I plotted my next steps. With financial security came the luxury of time to rediscover who I was beyond my relationship with James. When I was ready, I accepted a position with a boutique investment firm focused on funding women-led startups. The salary was half what I'd earned at Morgan Stanley, but the work was meaningful, and I discovered I had valuable perspective to offer entrepreneurs navigating the complexities of business growth while maintaining their core values. 3 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected letter. James had been sentenced to 6 years in federal prison but was serving his time at a minimum security facility. His letter was neither an apology nor an accusation, simply a reflection on how thoroughly he had lost his way in pursuit of wealth and status. I convinced myself that rules were for ordinary people, he wrote, that my intelligence entitled me to take shortcuts others couldn't see. I didn't value what really mattered until it was gone. I didn't respond. Some chapters are better left closed. Last month, my firm backed a promising medical technology company founded by a brilliant neuroscientist who left academia to commercialize her research. During our first meeting, she confessed her fears about losing her scientific integrity in the business world. How do I build something successful without compromising who I am? She asked. I thought carefully before answering. Success isn't just about the valuation of your company. It's about staying true to your values while creating something meaningful. The moment you compromise your core principles for expedience or appearance, you've already failed, regardless of what the balance sheet says. She nodded slowly. You sound like you've learned that lesson personally. The hard way, I acknowledged. But it was worth every painful step. As I left her lab that evening, I felt the weight of my wedding ring, which I still wore on my right hand as a reminder, differently than before. It no longer represented loss or betrayal, but a hard-won wisdom I couldn't have gained any other way. Sometimes the most valuable lessons cost everything we thought we wanted, only to give us what we truly need. My golden parachute wasn't the financial settlement, substantial though it was. It was the reclamation of myself, the woman who had temporarily disappeared into someone else's expectation, but who had found her way back, stronger and more certain than before. Playing with dirt again? My sister laughed as I loaded seedlings into my car. Dad says you've thrown away your MBA to become a glorified gardener. Little did they know those seedlings would sprout into a $30 million business that would revolutionize urban agriculture. Sometimes the smallest seeds yield the most surprising harvests. The derision in my sister Valerie's voice was nothing new. Since quitting my management consulting job 3 years ago, my family had made their disapproval abundantly clear. Their golden child had gone rogue, trading PowerPoint presentations and corporate lunches for soil samples and growth charts. It's not just gardening, I said, carefully arranging the last tray of microgreen seedlings. And yes, I'm still playing with dirt as you call it. Valerie leaned against my 10-year-old Honda, arms crossed over her designer blouse. At 35, she embodied everything our achievement-obsessed family valued. Senior vice president at a multinational bank, tasteful penthouse in the financial district, vacations that make perfect Instagram portfolios. Mom's worried about you, Jack. We all are. You're 33, living in that tiny apartment, driving this ancient car, and what? Growing lettuce on rooftops? This isn't what Dad paid Stanford tuition for. I closed the trunk, suppressing the familiar mixture of frustration and self-doubt her words triggered. Tell Mom I'm fine. The business is growing. We just signed 2 more buildings. Buildings that let you grow plants on their roofs, she said, clearly unimpressed. Very prestigious. My phone buzzed with a text from Amara, my business partner. Meeting with investors moved up. How soon can you get here? I have to go, I told Valerie. Investor meeting. She raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. People are actually investing in this scheme. I didn't bother responding. After 3 years of similar conversations, I learned that no explanation would suffice. My family had decided my urban agriculture startup was a hobby, a phase I was going through before inevitably returning to the corporate fold. As I drove across town to our office, a converted warehouse in a rapidly evolving industrial district, I thought about how it had all started, not with some grand vision of disrupting agriculture, but with a simple rooftop garden on my apartment building. Stressed from 70-hour work weeks and soul-crushing projects, I'd started growing vegetables as therapy, something tangible, living that responded to care in ways spreadsheets never did. My neighbors noticed, asked for advice on starting their own gardens. Building management saw the potential for green marketing and offered me more space. Then came the realization that changed everything. Urban buildings were vast, untapped growing spaces with built-in markets directly below them. Why ship produce thousands of miles when you could grow it right where people lived and worked? I'd met Amara at an urban sustainability conference where I'd gone seeking advice on irrigation systems. With her background in environmental engineering and my business experience, something clicked. 6 months later, I quit my job and Urban Harvest was born. Now we manage 27 productive gardens across the city, from hotel rooftops to corporate headquarters to hospital grounds. We developed a proprietary system that made urban agriculture not just environmentally sound but economically viable, the holy grail that had eluded so many before us. But my family still thought I was playing in the dirt. There you are, Amara said as I hurried into our conference room, where she sat with our financial director, Pablo. The Greenfield partners are already on their way. Sorry, family delay, I explained, setting up my laptop. What's the change? They're bringing their full investment committee, Pablo said, excitement evident in his voice. I think they're ready to commit. I felt a rush of adrenaline. Greenfield Ventures wasn't just any investment firm. They were the premier funders in sustainable technology. Their support would mean not just capital but validation of everything we've been building. How are the presentation slides? I asked, pulling up our deck. Perfect, Amara assured me. At 38, she brought a steady confidence to our partnership that balanced my occasional doubts. I updated the growth projections based on the Sanders Building data. We're outperforming our estimates by 22%. I nodded, scanning the room to ensure everything was perfect. Our conference room told our story visually, living walls of herbs and vegetables, Digital displays showing real-time data from our sites across the city, architectural models of our next-generation growing systems. My phone buzzed again. My father. Valerie says you're still pursuing this garden project. Let's talk about getting you back into proper business. I silenced my phone as voices approached down the hallway. Just remember, Amara whispered, we're not just selling produce. We're selling a revolution in urban food systems. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of presentations, questions, and discussion. The Greenfield team was thorough, probing every aspect of our business model, technology, and growth strategy. But I could see the growing interest in their eyes as we walked them through the numbers. The productivity per square foot, the elimination of transportation costs, the premium customers willingly paid for hyper-local produce. What you've built here is remarkable, said Catherine Weiss, Greenfield's managing partner, as we concluded. Your execution is far ahead of anyone else in this space. The question, added her colleague, is scale. Can you replicate this success in other cities? That's exactly why we're seeking this investment, I explained. We've proven the model here. Now we're ready to expand to Chicago, Boston, and Austin in the next 18 months. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. We'd like to move forward with due diligence. Our team will be in touch tomorrow to schedule the next steps. After they left, the three of us stood in momentary stunned silence before erupting into cheers. This is it, Pablo said, grinning widely. $7 million in funding. Do you know what this means? It means we were right, Amara said simply, squeezing my arm. All those people who said urban agriculture couldn't be profitable at scale, we proved them wrong. Including my family, I thought but didn't say. Let's not celebrate too early, I cautioned. Due diligence can uncover issues we haven't anticipated. Always the careful one, Amara teased. But today, let's enjoy this moment. Dinner tonight? I'm calling the whole team. As they began making plans, I stepped out to the balcony that overlooked our demonstration garden, a lush oasis of productivity in the midst of concrete and steel. Neat rows of vegetables, herbs, and edible flowers grew in our patented modular system, designed to maximize yield while minimizing water and energy use. I thought about how far we'd come from my first haphazard rooftop garden. The innovations we developed out of necessity, water reclamation systems, lightweight growing mediums, iode monitoring tools had become our competitive advantage, the intellectual property that investors now valued in the millions. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. Darling, your father is concerned. Richard's firm has an opening in their strategy department. Excellent salary and benefits. Shall I put in a word? I sighed, pocketing the phone without responding. Even now, with 27 sites, 40 employees, and major investors knocking on our door, they couldn't see what we were building. 2 weeks later, the investment was confirmed. $7 million to expand Urban Harvest across the country. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning, picked up immediately by several business publications and sustainability blogs. By afternoon, my phone was flooded with congratulatory messages from friends, former colleagues, industry contacts, and a terse text from my father. $7 million. Call me. I waited until evening, after reviewing contracts with our lawyers and planning sessions with the team. When I finally called, he answered on the first ring. $7 million, he said without preamble. For growing vegetables on rooftops. For transforming urban food systems, I corrected. For building technology that makes cities more sustainable and resilient. A pause. The Wall Street Journal mentioned your company. Of course that would be what impressed him. Not the environmental impact, not the communities we were feeding, but recognition from a publication he respected. They did, I confirmed. They're running a feature next week on innovation in food systems. Another pause. Your mother and I would like to see this operation of yours. Perhaps dinner afterward. It wasn't an apology for 3 years of dismissal. It wasn't even an acknowledgement that he might have been wrong. But coming from my father, it was significant. I'd like that, I said carefully. How about Thursday? I can give you a tour of our main site and the office. Thursday works. 4 o'clock? 4 is perfect. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment, looking out at the city lights. In the 3 years since starting Urban Harvest, I'd invited my parents to see our work countless times. They'd always declined, too busy or not interested enough to make the effort. Now, with the validation of serious investment and media coverage, they were suddenly available. Part of me felt bitter about this, that external validation meant more to them than my passion or hard work. But another part understood. They'd grown up in different times, with different measures of success. Risk-taking wasn't valued in their world. Stability and prestige were the currencies that mattered. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally ready to understand what I was building. Thursday arrived, bringing unexpected nerves. I pitched to skeptical investors, negotiated with demanding corporate clients, and managed crises from pest outbreaks to system failures. But explaining my vision to my parents somehow felt more daunting. The great Jack Chen, nervous about a simple tour. Amara teased, finding me adjusting the displays in our visitor center for the third time. "They're my parents," I said, as if that explained everything. She squeezed my shoulder. "They're going to be impressed, Jack. What you've built here is extraordinary. Even the most stubborn people can't deny what they see with their own eyes." "You don't know my father," I muttered, but I appreciated her encouragement. At precisely 4 o'clock, my parents arrived. My father in his customary business suit, my mother elegant in understated designer wear. They looked out of place among our industrial chic surroundings, like visiting dignitaries in a foreign country. "This is interesting," my mother said, her eyes roaming over the living walls that bordered our reception area. "It's all edible," I explained, gesturing to the herbs and leafy greens. "We harvest from these walls 3 times a week for local restaurants." "In the office?" my father asked, clearly skeptical. "It's a demonstration of our systems," I said. "Follow me and you'll see how it works at scale." I led them through the building, explaining our operations. The seedling nursery where we started thousands of plants each week. The research lab where we tested new varieties and growing methods. The monitoring station where technicians tracked data from all our sites across the city. My father asked unexpected technical questions about yield rates and water usage. My mother seemed most interested in the social impact, our partnerships with schools and community centers, the food justice programs we'd initiated in underserved neighborhoods. Finally, we reached the rooftop of our building, our first full-scale commercial site and still our most productive. Half an acre of vegetables, herbs, and edible flowers grew in neat rows, with staff members harvesting for afternoon deliveries to restaurants and markets across the city. "All this grows here, year-round?" My mother sounded genuinely astonished. "Year-round," I confirmed. "Our systems are climate-controlled. We use 95% less water than conventional farming, no pesticides, and our carbon footprint for distribution is minimal because we're right here in the city." My father walked slowly along the rows, examining the irrigation system, the structural elements, the monitoring devices attached to each growing bed. I was explaining our proprietary soil mixture to my mother when he rejoined us. "This is no hobby," he said, and I detected something new in his voice. "This is engineering, architecture, logistics. You've built a vertical supply chain." "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what we've done." He nodded, looking out over the garden, then to the city skyline beyond. "And you own the intellectual property? The systems, the technology?" "All patented or patent pending," I confirmed. "That's a large part of what the investors are funding, scaling our technology to other cities." Another nod. "Smart. Very smart." It wasn't exactly an apology for 3 years of dismissal. It wasn't even direct praise. But coming from my father, it felt momentous. Dinner that evening had a different tone from our usual family gatherings. Gone were the subtle digs about my career choices, the suggestions for real jobs, the comparisons to Valerie's corporate achievements. Instead, my parents asked genuine questions about the business, about our expansion plans, about the challenges of scaling to other cities. "I didn't understand before," my father said as we waited for dessert. "I thought you were just gardening." I nubbed Dad. "But this is legitimate innovation. Disruptive technology. You're not just growing vegetables, you're reimagining urban infrastructure." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "We're proud of you, Jack. You saw something we couldn't see." The validation felt good. Better than I wanted to admit. But as I drove home that night, I realized something important. Their approval, while welcome, wasn't necessary anymore. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped measuring my success against their expectations. 1 year after the Greenfield investment, Urban Harvest had expanded to 4 additional cities, with 30 new growing sites and over 100 employees. We'd been featured in major business publications, sustainability conferences, and even a documentary about the future of food. My family had become enthusiastic supporters, with my father often sending me articles about urban agriculture or introducing me to potential business connections. My sister had even invested personally in our Series B funding round, a gesture that meant more to me than the money itself. Quite a change from playing with dirt, Amara observed one evening as we reviewed plans for our newest site in Austin. I laughed. Sometimes people need to see success to believe in the vision. And sometimes, she added thoughtfully, the best validation comes from proving the skeptics wrong. She was right. The journey from rooftop garden to multi-city agricultural enterprise had been filled with doubters, not just my family, but potential clients, investors, even other urban farming ventures who said our model wouldn't scale. But with each harvest, each new site, each technological improvement, we'd proven that urban agriculture could be more than a feel-good sustainability project. It could be a viable business, a transformative force in urban food systems. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Just saw your interview in Business Week. Impressive. Dinner Sunday to discuss the new expansion. I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Sometimes success speaks a language everyone understands. But the real victory wasn't winning my family's approval. It was building something meaningful despite their doubt. The garden had indeed grown into an empire, one carefully tended seedling at a time.